Stop the horses. Ivar, Duke of Northmere, had the carriage door open and one boot on the step before it had properly halted. And November storm came at him sideways off the moor and took the breath straight out of his chest, because there was something at the foot of the 7-mile stone that was not a stone. It was a woman sitting down in the road. She had been walking. He could see where she had come from, the trail of her in the mud. She had got as far as the milestone and she had sat down on the wet grass beside it with her hands in her lap, quite tidily, the way a person sits when they have run out of the thing that keeps them upright. She had no cloak. She wore a black stuff gown and a thin shawl that was no more used than a handkerchief, and she was soaked through to the skin, madam. He went down on one knee in the water. Madam, can you hear me? She lifted her head. Her lips were blue and she had to try twice before anything came out. I am quite well, thank you, said Unwin Pentreth. I am going to Harrowfield. Harrowfield is 9 miles. Yes, she said, I know. I am going slowly. Ivar had spent 11 years being told he was a hard man, and had on the whole agreed, and he discovered kneeling in a flooded road at 10 at night that this was not so. Something in his chest came apart at that sentence and never afterwards went back together the way it had been. You will come into the carriage. I am not able to pay for a carriage, sir, and I do not take what I cannot pay for. Nay, said the Duke, over his shoulder the rug and the flask. He had buried his godmother that morning. That was the whole of the reason he was on that road at that hour. Old Lady Merritt of Aldwyn Hall had been the only person alive who had ever told Ivar the truth to his face, and she had died on the Tuesday at 81, and he had come down for the funeral meaning to be gone within the hour, because he could not endure the house full of vantages doing sums with their eyes. There had been a young woman at the graveside in a black stuff gown, standing well back behind the family, and she had been the only one crying. He had noticed. He had thought, in the vague way of a man with 3 counties on his mind, that somebody ought to see about her. Then he had driven 10 miles north to the inn at Harrowfield, and while he waited for his supper, he had gone through his pocketbook and found, folded in the back of it, a letter that had been there 3 weeks. It was in his godmother's hand, shaky and enormous, and he had not opened it, because he had been at Northmere settling a dispute about a weir, and because there is always tomorrow, until there is not. Ivor, it said, I am dying, and do not write me anything foolish about doctors. I have one thing to ask you, and I have never asked you for anything. My companion Anwen Pentreth has been with me 5 years, and has been better to me than my own blood. When I am gone, the Vantages will have her out of this house inside a day, and they will do it in a way that lets them feel virtuous. She has no family living and £11 in the world, and she will not ask a soul for help, not even you. So it is no use waiting to be asked. See her safe. That is all. Do not be slow about it, my dear. You are always so very slow about the things that are not business. Ivor had read it twice, standing up, and had not sat down again. He had left his supper on the table, and shouted for the horses, and turned the carriage south into the storm at 9:30 at night, 31 days too late. He got her into the carriage. She was past arguing by then, though she made a good attempt at the doorway on the grounds that she would spoil the seats. Inside, with the lamp lit and the rain drumming on the roof like gravel, he wrapped the rug round her, and when that was not enough, he took off his own greatcoat and put it round her shoulders on top of it, and she went rigid, and then quite suddenly stopped fighting and gathered it in with both fists. Drink that. She drank. She coughed. Colour came into her mouth and left again. You are the Duke, she said. You were at the back of the church. You did not come to the house afterwards. No, she was very fond of you. Anwen's teeth were chattering so hard she had to stop between the words. She used to say you were a good man made of the wrong materials. Ivor found he had to look out of the window for a moment. Miss Pentreth, how did you come to be on this road at 10 o'clock at night in a storm with no cloak? She was quiet so long that he thought she had gone off. I was told to leave, she said at last. It was quite civil. Mrs. Vantage said that with dear Lady Merritt gone there was no situation for me, which is true, and that it would be awkward for me to remain, which is also true. She said my box would be put at the lodge gate and I might send for it when I had somewhere to send it to. A pause. She gave me a shilling for the mail. It was a kindly meant shilling. She said so twice. And you walked. The mail does not come through until Thursday. Her voice had no self-pity in it at all, which he found harder to bear than weeping, and I could not stay in that house until Thursday. Not after. After what? She turned her head away. Miss Pentreth, Mr. Hollis Vantage, she said to the black window, has been telling me since June that he meant to marry me. Not in front of anyone. He is careful. This evening in the book room I asked him whether he would tell his mother, because I had nowhere to go, and he laughed at me. She said it very evenly. He said that a man says things in June, and that I had surely never thought, a companion at 25, with no fortune and a Cornish name, and that I had done very well out of the old lady already, and I ought not to be greedy. The carriage went on through the rain. Ivor did not trust himself to speak for the better part of a mile, so I found that I would rather be on the road than in the house. Anwen said, "That is all." It was not brave. It was only that the road seemed cleaner. Nay, Ivor put his stick against the roof. Northmere, not Harrowfield. "Sir, I cannot. My sister keeps house for me," he said. "Lady Cotterell, a widow of 44, deaf in one ear and pitiless in every other respect, and she will be in the hall in her dressing gown within 4 minutes of our arrival. You will be as respectable at Northmere as you would be in a cathedral." He looked at her, small and blue-lipped and drowned in his coat. "And Miss Pentreth, you will not set foot in Aldwyn Hall again as long as you live. Not for the box, not for anything. I will attend to Aldwyn myself." She was 4 days in a fever, and Ivor, who had a weird dispute and 2 magistrates' letters and a quarry to settle, did none of it. His sister found him on the second night sitting on a hard chair in the passage outside the blue bedroom with his coat off and his eyes red. "Ivor, go to bed." In a moment. "You have known her 19 hours. She sat down beside a milestone in the rain. "Judith," he said, and folded her hands and waited. She had not the least intention of getting up again. If I had opened that letter when it came, she would have been safe in this house 3 weeks ago, and Hollis Vantage would never have gotten near her. He put his head back against the wall. In a moment. On the 5th day the fever broke, and on the 6th he rode to Aldwyn Hall. He went as executor, which he was and which the Vantages had not troubled to remember, and he took his godmother's attorney with him, and read the will aloud to the assembled family in the same book room where Hollis Vantage had laughed at her. Lady Merritt had left to her companion Unwin Pentreth the sum of £2,000, the freehold, the dower house at Aldwyn with its garden and paddock, her own library entire, and the pearls she had worn at her wedding. The room was silent for a considerable time. "There was some question," said Mr. Vantage at last, "as to whether the codicil was properly. It is properly witnessed. It is dated in August, and you have had a copy since Tuesday week," said Ivor. "You knew of it on the morning you put her out with a shilling." Nobody answered that. "The legacies will be paid within the month," he said, standing, "and I shall audit every farthing of this estate before I discharge myself. If I find 1 volume missing out of that library, I will bring it before the courts and let every newspaper in England have the reason." He picked up his hat. "You may write your excuses. I shall not read them. There is a young woman at Northmere who walked 9 miles into a storm rather than sleep another night under this roof, and I take that as sufficient evidence of the character of the house." He was at the door when Hollis Vantage said something about how a man says things in June. Ivor turned round and looked at him for perhaps 4 seconds, and did not touch him, and did not raise his voice, and Hollis Vantage sat down. And when Pentreth came downstairs at Northmere on the 11th day, thin as a reed and wrapped in one of Lady Cotterell's shawls, and was told about the will in the small parlour with the fire lit, she heard it all the way through without a word. Then she put her hands over her face. "She did not tell me." "She would not have," said Ivor. "She knew you would have argued." "I should have argued." A wet, wrecked laugh. "I should have argued very much. I am aware. That is why she made me executor and not you." Anwen wept then, properly, for the first time since the graveside. And Lady Cotterell sat beside her and let her, and the Duke of Northmere stood at the window with his back to the room and looked at the moor until she was done, because he had understood, somehow, that she would not want him to see it. She would not stay as a guest. She said so on the 14th day, with her chin up in the exact way that he was learning to dread and to love. So they compromised, which Ivor had not done in 11 years. The dower house was untenantable in December. The library was to come to Northmere for the winter, and there were 1,100 volumes and no catalogue at all, and Miss Pentreth would do the work at the proper rate and go to her own house in the spring. That was the arrangement, and it was strictly kept, and it fooled nobody in the household above the rank of scullery maid. Northmere was a silent house. It had been silent since his mother died. And that winter there was a woman in the long library with a slate and a stack of Lady Merit's books, and she sang while she worked, not for anyone, quite unconsciously in Cornish low, the way a person sings who was taught it before she could read. Ivor took to working at the library table. His steward found this remarkable and said nothing. He learned in January that she had been born at Pentreth in the far west, that her father had been a mine captain and had died in the ground when she was 9, and that her £11 had never grown, because she sent every quarter's wages to an aunt who was blind. He learned in February that she read Latin better than he did, and would not say so until pressed, and then said so with great satisfaction. He learned in March that when he came into a room her hands went still on the page, and that this had begun somewhere around Christmas. On the 10th of April the dower house was ready. Her boxes were corded in the hall. Ivor found her in the long library at 7 in the morning, standing at the end of the shelves with the slate in her hand and nothing left to write on it. "It is finished," she said. 1106. There were more than they thought. "Miss Pentreth, you have been very good to me, your grace, and I have been careful all winter not to be a person who needs anything, because that is the only way I know how to be safe." Her voice was not steady. "So I would rather go today than tomorrow if the carriage can be got ready. I have something to say to you first." "Please do not. I am going to," said Ivor. He came and stood at the end of the shelves, and he had rehearsed this on horseback for 4 months, and none of it was any use to him now. "Your letter sat in my pocketbook for 3 weeks, he said. "My godmother wrote asking me to keep you safe, and I did not open it, because there was a weir, and because I have always believed that the things that matter can wait until Thursday. Because of that, you were in a book room with Hollis Vantage, and on a road in a storm with no cloak, and I will carry that for the rest of my life, and I am not asking you to relieve me of it." He drew a breath. "So I will not tell you that I want to take care of you. You have had a great deal of that sort of talk from a man who meant a season and said a lifetime." Anwen was very still. "I will tell you the truth instead, which is that this house has been quiet for 19 years and you have been singing in it since December, and I come into this room 40 times a day on errands I invent on the stairs." His voice went. "You have £2,000 and a freehold and a library, and you do not need a single thing from me, and I am glad of it, because it means that if you say it I shall know exactly why. Stay, not as a guest. Marry me." She put the slate down on the table very carefully, as though it might break. "You found me sitting in the road," she said. "Yes, nobody has ever come back for me. Not once in my life. Not my aunt, not the Vantages, not—" She stopped and started again. "You had gone 10 miles. You were warm and you were fed, and there was no earthly reason to turn the horses round." "There was every reason," said Ivor. "I merely had it in my pocket for 3 weeks without reading it." And Anwen Pentreth crossed the space between them and put her hands flat against his chest and her forehead against her hands, and stood like that, shaking, while the Duke of Northmere folded his arms around her at last and held on. "Yes," she said into his waistcoat. "Yes, of course, yes." They were married in the June in the little church at Northmere, and the dower house at Aldwyn was given over rent-free to a school, and Anwen taught in it 2 mornings a week for 30 years and would not be argued out of it. Ivor kept his godmother's letter. He had it framed and hung, not in a place of honour, but in his own dressing-room, where he saw it every morning while he shaved, and in all the years that followed, whatever else the Duke of Northmere was slow about, he was never again slow about her.